We are WNST, AM 1570, Towson, Baltimore. Baltimore positive. We're on to Cincinnati soon, but not just yet. Next Friday, we're going to be on to the Maryland Crab Cake Tour, or back to the Maryland Crab Cake Tour. Now that the Orioles have been eliminated, I'm going to be setting up some things. We're going to be at Mama's on the half shell. I'm going to sort of extend this oyster tour and really have fun with it because I put October aside. Our friends at the Maryland Lottery have put the entire fall season aside, not just for pumpkin and spice and apple pie, but Raven Scratch-Offs. We're going to be next Friday, Pizza John's. Yes, they have a crab cake at Pizza John's. I'm going to eat it. I'm going to share it with Luke Jones if he wants it because it's Luke's birthday. Man, what a dude. They got eliminated on your birthday. I mean, like, wow. Wow, wow, wow. I forgot that part. Our friends at Liberty Pure Solutions sending me out on this crazy oyster tour, and I'm wearing my Liberty Pure shirt, and our friends at Curio Wellness. The 26th anniversary crab and oyster, as promised by Jessica Vallis, will be premiering this week with the launch of the oyster tour. And Luke has been back and forth. Our Jiffy Lube and Royal Farm sponsorship that sends you back and forth from Camden Yards to Owings Mills. Not going to be sending you Camden Yards, but maybe one more time here, unless there's other news that we'll know about. But what an ending, dude. It's never easy, but you pitch, you don't score, fans aren't there, bad vibes, just bad at bats, just bad, 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 bad. I mean, two guys got hit on the hand with pitches. I mean, if the series went on, I don't know if they play. Dude, it's just a thought. And, they're going to go out and sell season tickets, and you can read my dear David Rubin. You can do all of that. But the baseball side of this is whatever this was this year wasn't good enough. And it's kind of a shame because it really was good enough for a long time. I mean, if they play the World Series in June, this team would have won the World Series or could have won the World Series.
Yeah, and that's where I really go back to taking a look at this. You know me, Nestor. I'm a numbers guy, and I'm a guy that I take pride in not being the guy that's going to overreact to things. If this had been a team that played fantastic baseball in August and September and did this two-game sweep thing, because that happens. I mean, the Houston Astros, we were talking about them a lot, their pedigree, right? They've been here, they've been to the ALCS how many years in a row? And they got swept, right? It's
Dude,
over
they
for
won
them.
101 games, and I don't know, they led for an inning in those 3 games last. You know what I mean? Like,
Right,
they got just whitewalled last year, and that's what
right.
happens to 21-year-old ball players when Nate Eovaldi gets involved this time of year.
Right. So for me, it's not nearly as much, even though right now it's so raw, it's so painful. Believe me, there are a lot of watery eyes in that clubhouse, more so than there were in Arlington a year ago. Absolutely. I don't think it was even close in that regard. And I think a lot of it has to do with what you were just saying. They had a 101 win season. There was a perception that they were ahead of schedule, right? I mean, they made the massive jump from 21 to 22, and then another really big jump from 22 to 23 to go 101 and 61 and be the number one seed and win the AL East title. So even with that disappointment, I think there was also a sense of, hey, we're fine. This is just the beginning. And I think there was also a sense of Texas Rangers just kind of beat our butts and they were just really, really good. And we were bad, but they were really, really good. I don't know if you can say that when you're talking about losing 1-0 and then 2-1. And I think more so for me, and this gets back to my bigger point here in terms of where you go from here. Not that all is lost, not that all these players stink, not that they need to fire everyone or, everything you're seeing on social media. And I get it. Fans are very frustrated, as they should be. But I think for me, that frustration stems from the fact that we saw too much of this starting in really late June, right after that Yankee series. I mean, they lost 5 in a row, right? That was kind of the start of, hey, this is not, they're not going to be 30 games over 500 at the All-Star break, and they weren't.
Well, it was
Uh,
also the reality that Bradish and Means weren't coming back,
sure,
and
sure,
Wells. I mean, that they had lost a lot of
right.
innings.
And I think and we need to continue to recognize that. I understand
I'm going to
there's going
lead
to,
with that, just so you know. Like, for me, I'm going to lead with the fact that, and if I sat with Mike Elias, not to kiss his ass or anything like that, I'd say, dude, you put together a team that could have won the World Series. They very well, if Rodriguez's arm doesn't fall off, Bradish, Means is always a little bit more, on the edge for me. But my God, like and then what happened to Westberg, and I mean, even the trading deadline getting Eflin, I'm kind of okay with. You know what I mean? Like he didn't win, he didn't do a great job at the trading deadline. I'll say that. I mean,
Right.
I can be critical of that, but I don't know that you could pick up the pieces for the pieces that were lost and at bats that were lost. And I don't think Mullins was healthy early in the year, right? Like there's this, and Rutschman crying at his locker, and you can speak to that, like. I'm not going to kill these guys at all. I'm just not. I mean, I think there's a lot. 25-year-old catcher who's going to the Hall of Great falls apart after he takes a foul tip and refuses. Bull Durham refuses to mention it to anybody until he's in tears at the locker after it's over with. And even now, you're still guessing like what happened, how bad was it? Because he's probably not the kind of kid that's going to like lead with that because he's too Joe Flacco for that.
I mean, I'll get to my bigger point that I was trying to make, and then we can start to go through this because
I'm
there
sorry, we're
there's
meandering.
no,
We're
no,
sitting here
no, it's okay.
blubbering
Look,
today,
it's
so
raw, and we've done this a lot with the Ravens, and now unfortunately, and I think this adds to the frustration when the Orioles are doing the same thing, only it's October instead of January. That frustration mounts. I mean, think about it. In this town, when we're talking about high profile postseason success, or just say postseason success, period. Okay, the Ravens beat the Texans last January, did get to an AFC title game. They did take a step, but that team was the best in the NFL during the regular season. So it's still, it feels, leaves you wanting. The Orioles have not won a home playoff game since the Delman Young game. Look, that was an amazing moment. Anyone who was in that ballpark knows. And I get it, it was the division series, it wasn't a World Series, but that was an incredible moment. They haven't done anything to be happy about since 2 days after that when they clinched in Detroit, right? When Bud Norris pitched well and Nelson Cruz hit the ball off the right field foul pole, right? I mean, that was a decade ago.
yeah. But I'm
So,
older than that, and you are too, celebrating a birthday that like the only thing they had before that was Andino and Ripken. Like, you know
right,
what I mean? I mean, like, you and I referenced the Messina, Tony Fernandez,
right.
Armando Benitez. I mean, like, what's 27 years ago? Alan and I were on that. I let my beard grow. I thought I had a playoff beard going. I'll shave it for Maritime Magic on Friday night. But I would just say like everybody hangs on this Delman Young moment. I don't know what number two is. Being happy the Red Sox got knocked out. That was a moment. But I
Yeah,
mean, like, there's a lot of. It's 27 years
sure,
since
sure,
Alan and I
sure.
left Cleveland with Roberto Alomar, and like they one moment in 27 years. It's insane. So
But
yes,
look, older fans are used to this at this point. But even when you're talking about 20
you
somethings,
should never
which
get used to it.
I don't disagree with that, Nestor. But I'm trying to keep it more modern. Again, we've been talking about what's happened for 40 years for as long as I've known you, 15 years. But even for 20 somethings, who are the ones that populate the ballpark? Like that you see, the diehards that you see on Orioles Twitter, for example, right, on social media. They were kids or teenagers with Delman Young, and now 10 years later, it's like, hey, we got this new core and Mike Elias and Adley Rutschman and Gunnar Henderson, and they've had a lot. They've won what 100, almost 200 games over the last 2 years. 192 games over the last 2 years. But they've, I mean, they've taken an offer in the postseason. That's frustrating. However, let me get back to my bigger point here that for me is going to drive the offseason. It's that this thing just started going sideways in the second half. Through July, through August, when people were starting to talk about their offense not being as consistent enough as it had been, as consistent as it had been in the first half of the season, I was a guy continuing to defend that because I'm looking at the larger sample size, right? The larger body of work had said, hey, April, they swung the bats really well. By the way, May, they didn't swing the bats incredibly well, but they pitched really well. And May is when Kyle Bradish came back and John Means was there for 4 starts at least. And they had, Grayson Rodriguez and, of course, Corbin Burns doing his thing. Albert Suarez had started to emerge at that point. So, their pitching was healthier at that point in
Paul
time.
Irvin even was pitching well then.
He did for a time, right? Early in the season, he did.
Yeah.
But then you go on to June. They had the monster schedule. They absolutely raked. I mean, they had a team OPS of 847 in the month of June. I mean, that's excellent, especially in this day and age with its run scoring
Not
environment.
sustainable either.
So, well,
I
that's
mean, if they did that for 6 months, they win
oh,
115
sure,
games.
sure. Yeah, I mean, if they were,
If
but the point
nothing
was,
went wrong for this team, I mean, if nothing went wrong for this team, and I mean nothing like Holiday, Mayo. I mean, if those guys would have hit in August, we wouldn't be talking about how bad they were. I mean, those at bats were replaced. Those humans, those arms were replaced by suboptimal Chase McDermott, Kate Povich. I mean, we're just talking about different humans, dude. We're talking about 22-year-old kids doing the job that Grayson Rodriguez was doing as a 25. Like it's a massive step down the caliber of the Austin Slaters and the Eloy Jimenezes that were taking at bats, not to mention whoever was taking innings here after everything went haywire with injuries. Not
yeah.
with failure, with injuries. And Rutschman could have taken that thing and said, "I'm down a month and I got to get right." And whatever Rutschman did, and Lord knows I don't have a press pass to ask him. You do, and he won't answer you if you ask him. Like whatever it comes out to, whatever happened, I'm convinced he's hurt. I mean, I until wake me in 3 years if he stinks and he's not even a
Right.
Matt Wieters and he's like, I don't believe that about that kid. I think he's hurt, and I think a lot of guys were hurt, and I think I will I will be the first guy to make that excuse. If I was out, if I attaboyed Brandon Hyde, I run into him at the Rofo, and he knew who I was, and I knew who he was, and we went for a walk, I would say, man, I'm not going to be the guy beating Brandon Hyde up about not being able to win with the cast I just gave you. Emmanuel
Well,
Rivera, throw them all in.
well, Emmanuel
I
Rivera
think he's really
actually
good. Yeah.
he performed well, so he's not the best example, but
See, Venezuelan, I like him more
on
than he
pa-
is.
on paper, of course, he would be someone you would cite, and certainly not someone you would be penciling into your opening day starting lineup next year or anything like that. But again, the larger point that I'm trying to make here is this trended in this direction for a long time. And I think for as much as we kept talking about guys coming back and the individuals who were going to make it back in September, and look, a lot of those guys did make it back. But in the meantime, July, things started to go not so great. And obviously, they had pitching woes at various times, although the pitching was really good at other times. I mean, their rotation kind of became a relative strength by the end of the season. Yeah, they did an admirable job in that way. I mean, Dean Kramer stepped up. Zach Eflin being acquired stepped up. I mean, Zach Eflin pitched way better with the Orioles than he did with the Rays this year. Albert Suarez, we talked about him all year, right? And what he did. Even Cade Povich, who, certainly not someone that I'm just going to pencil into my starting rotation next February, but he had some good starts down the stretch. So there was such a hyper focus for so long, and I'm as guilty of this as anyone, of looking at the pitching, but the bats, August, a 691 OPS, right? September, it was really the last 7 days of September that saved them from having another really lousy month. I mean, they ended up having a 714 OPS, which isn't great, but it's not awful either. But until, right around September 20th, the Orioles were having the kind of offensive month that the Royals had, which the Royals scored fewer runs than anyone in the league in the month of September. But again, speaks to it's a
They
two-game
scored one
series.
and two.
Right, exactly. It's not like they're sitting there saying, "Oh my gosh, we look at all these runs. We scored 3 runs and our opponent scored one in 2 games." I mean, that's what we're talking about here. But that's where I can't put too much on 2 games in terms of how I'm going to evaluate, in terms of how I'm going to approach the off season. I'm looking at the last 2 months, but that that goes into what you were just alluding to. This team was banged up, and look, people are going to say, "Well, they had their regulars in the lineup by the end of the year." Jordan Westberg admitted he wasn't 100% yet. I know from talking to some people in the post-game clubhouse, the sense I got is Ryan Mountcastle had something torn in his wrist. I mean, he might need to get surgery this offseason. He was trying to make it back, right? And people will say, well, he shouldn't be playing injured. That's fine, but guys like Eloy Jimenez, we saw how that works, right? We saw how that looked. I mean, that guy, I don't know if he had more than one hit in the month of September before they finally optioned him. But Not Gunnar Henderson, Adley Rutschman. Here's the quote. I asked him a question, not so much in terms of, I didn't even ask him if he was healthy. I asked him point blank, Adley, you've had so much success really from the time you arrived 2 years ago, and you had such a strong first half. You had a really rough month of July, and it seemed like no matter what work you put in, because we saw it. I saw him taking extra BP and doing those things. I never once suggested he wasn't working hard enough, but
Oh, that
I
may
asked
may
him,
be worse if you're hurt.
maybe, but I asked him, why couldn't you get going? Why couldn't you rebound from, at the time you just said, a bad July, right? I mean, anyone's entitled to a bad month. Gunnar Henderson didn't have a very good August, although his August never approached what we saw from Rutschman in July, August, or September in terms of just being that bad. And someone else asked him a question later in the session. It was like I think he spoke for 5 or 6 minutes, not long, but pretty long by post game standards. And he, at two different points, the quotes were acknowledging needing to, quote, let my body get right. And at another point, and this was his other answer, he said, your body goes through a lot of things during the season. Now, I saw some of the replies I saw on social media to those quotes that I put out there. I mean, fans just, sometimes it's okay to put your phone
Well,
down.
I mean, yeah, I
So,
told you the night
but that
Allen
said,
was murderous was the night the Orioles get eliminated.
right,
People are nuts. I mean,
right.
literally, people are
So,
nuts the night a team gets eliminated. Everybody's firing the coach. Lock and Four is out of his mind on the general manager thing. It feels personal to me. Like I don't.
so
They were on pace to win 110 games, and everybody got hurt. I mean, to me, that's the lead. I'm not going to bury that. And Rutschman would be a huge part of that. And by the way, can I just say something? Because I know you're about to rant again about Rutschman because you were
I,
at the
I,
locker.
I, yeah,
But
go ahead.
but the PNC ad got pulled at the end. You know, the catching ad that he was doing, and they went back to the Mr. Weird, we're a boring bank guy, because it just felt like he was doing so, like even the marketing side of what they were trying to do with him is like, dude, turn it down. I'm trying to get healthy. I felt that and I saw that just watching the games every night. I feel for the kid. I feel for the criticism he's had. I just want to say that
So,
because I like the kid. He's a leader.
well, but if you're going to be on the field, you have to perform, right? I mean, there's the other side of that if you're so hurt, you're so injured, or you're so hurt, or you're so beat down. I mean, I talked about this a lot. He was replacement level. Go look in FanGraphs. You can do all the filters you want, right? You can filter from July 1st through the end of the season. He's a bottom five hitter among qualified major league batters around the league. Like, this isn't hyperbole. He was that bad, but he was asked. There was a follow up when he mentioned your body goes through a lot of things during the season, and someone said, anything specific, and he declined. So clearly, he's trying not to make excuses. I took that quote, and I'm assuming you took that quote as he's got something going on. Now, I'm not. I know a lot of people have just made the assumption that it was the foul tip he took off the hand in late June. Maybe that was. However, keep in mind, this is a guy who missed a couple games with a back injury, back tightness in August. I did watch him take batting practice on Wednesday, and it looked fine. There was not like he was grimacing, anything like that. However, a couple details that will lend itself again to what we're saying. Brian Ebel was watching him, and at a couple points, and obviously I have to stand by the dugout. I'm not right there at the cage. The way that the team broadcasters can be, like Jim Palmer, for example, can be right
Oh,
there.
you're not allowed out on the grass anymore.
No. I mean, that hasn't been that way since I've been on the beat. Going back to 2010 at
Oh
least.
man, I used to stand at the cage with Greg B. Genie and
Yeah,
watch
yeah.
Chris
We have
Wilson
to
hit
we have to be on the
BP.
warning track. Behind home plate. But and at a couple points he was even he had a few words with Brian Ebel. Now they might have been talking about the weather for all I know. I can't. Again, this is still more conjecture until we get something concrete. But you do you connect the dots there. I mean, we're still talking about someone that, even though we talked about the fact that he wasn't walking as much, and I remember you and I had an extensive discussion at Fadley's back in probably late
June?
May, something like
Yeah,
that,
yeah.
talking about the fact that, hey, even though the Orioles have scored all these runs, they haven't walked a whole lot. And I said to you, and I kind of broke it down. I went player by player, and Adley Rutschman was the major outlier
Well,
from
they
what he had been the
wanted
year
him
before.
swinging more based on last year, right?
Apparently, sure. I
And
mean, it definitely.
the hit he got in game 2 was a first pitch swing.
Well, yeah. I mean, I don't want to use anything about the second half of his season because it was just a disaster. But early in the year, Go look at the numbers. I mean, okay, he wasn't walking as much, but the slug was up. It hit home runs. His overall numbers were good. So that's where you look at this thing and say, how do you go from being an all-star in the middle, like in the first half of the season, and then you just become a bum? And when I say a bum, obviously I'm using a caricature, right? Just talking about in terms of a
The
bad player.
statistical profile.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
right. So that's where you look at it and say, okay, this isn't a case of someone who got old in the middle, in an off season or like Chris Davis, circa 2018. So it lends you to believe that there was some kind of an issue here. Now, again, I don't know if it's the hand. I don't know if it's the back. When you talk about things like bat speed and torque and power and things of that nature, I wouldn't be shocked if there's a core muscle issue, right? Something like that. I mean, how many Ravens players over the years have we heard get sports hernia surgery after a season? And you kind of wondered why he didn't have a great second half of the season. I mean,
He was
this
moving a
happens a
little
lot.
slow. I mean, anybody in our
And he's a
audience has a
catcher on
hernia
top of that.
issue. Moving from here to the toilet is a hard move, right?
Right. And,
Literally.
and again, I'm speculating on that part of it, but I'm not convinced that it could just be his hand. I don't know. But I'm hoping we're going to get some clarity here because again, even some of the replies to my social media post, and look, it's just like when you get a bad phone call on the radio, it's the vocal minority, right? Most of your fan base doesn't feel that way, but there's enough frustration in general about this club that I think it would behoove them if Adley Rutschman has been playing through an injury for them to disclose that at least enough information to say, hey, look, we know he had a bad second half. Adley knows more than anyone. He's been trying to work through it. He's going to be fine. And Rutschman's last quote, or his last with that specific answer, it was, I'll be ready to go for spring training. So I mentioned it
Not to
with
jump on my
him.
soapbox about this and about honesty and integrity and being honest, but people are gambling on this stuff too, right? And that's the
That's on
rub.
them.
That's the
But that's on
rub.
them.
Yeah, that's the
But that's
rub
on
in
them.
Owings Mills to say, are you being honest about your injury report? Are you being honest about what you're putting on the field? Are you being honest? And this would be for Mountcastle, who's playing for money, and pitchers who are pitching for money, and in contract situations where I ain't making any money bitching about being hurt. I got to go play. I got to
Sure.
do whatever I can do right now if I'm Ryan Mountcastle to make sure that I'm not Trey Mancini 2 years from now and out of, that I'm just not good enough anymore because of an injury or a perception of injury
Yeah.
or any of that. I think that's the part of this that I never understood till I got hurt. And I was a guy that spent my 20s and 30s around all these athletes all the time. I remember when I saw Rob Burnett tear himself up. It really, because he and I had a relationship. Seeing the amount of pain he was in as a football player. It's the first time I had come in contact with that since football came. I saw baseball players, but Ripken would just go out there and play, and all those guys were half roided up anyway. Before all of that. And baseball players didn't get hurt that much. Everybody, pitchers pitch. I mean, for the most part, other Messina getting in a fight and couldn't with Assman. But like, I saw the first injury, and I'll never forget this. When I got injured, when I had my knee torn up in 2006, and I was in crutches in the locker room, and Todd Heap was in crutches in the locker room. I remember going over to him, and everybody was calling him a sissy. And was it Greg Lloyd? Who hit him? I'm Greg Lloyd. I'm a different era. Who was the linebacker? You remember this stuff better than me. Porter? Was it Porter? Maybe. I don't know. Either way, I remember saying to Todd Heap, I knew it. This freaking hurts, dude. This sucks. Knee surgery sucks. And it hurts. And I cried the other day because I couldn't move. And like, going to the bathroom, sex, driving, breathing, it hurts. The drugs I have to take. And he's like, yeah, now imagine I'm out trying to play for a contract. And this is Todd Heap being a beautiful guy, just saying, yeah, and like I'm playing with my career on the line. You think I don't want to be out there? And dude, I was almost 40 years old when that happened. It took me that long doing this. As I bragged to Mr. Rubenstein in my letter, I could wallpaper his wall with my credentials. And I saw young hockey players trying to make it, Russian hockey players, Hispanic players like Armando Benitez, who couldn't even spell he was illiterate, literally couldn't write his name, couldn't sign an autograph, and out there getting crushed by these fans, the emotional, the physical, and then the pain and the injury is something that my gray beard's growing in. I feel for Adley Rutschman. You know what I mean? I do, in a way that, like, um I think he's hurt, and I don't know him. I have no, I like, I just watching it, watching that kind of level of player not become that player and fall off, and all of us questioning it. And the first thing he says at the locker with tears in his eyes is mentioning like things happen during the season, your body. That's code for me to say. That's like saying I had a mental health issue or anything that would be a sickness, or my dad's been battling something, or my mom has cancer. It's just sort of like, I get it, man. Like, we're all trying to be professionals. You're doing the best you can, but when you can't physically get the post, they see that in horses with the limp. Humans will just sit there and say, I'm fine, I got to play, coach. I've seen it. I mean, look at the guys getting hit in the head who go back into football games because they had to make a living. And that went on for 100 years, right? Like, so I would just say, be kind to Adley Rutschman for me. I'm going to be kind to Adley Rutschman. How about that? Because of all the warning
Sure,
signs I've seen,
sure,
including
and
pulling
look,
his commercial.
that that's fine. This team can't get a complete pass for the health issues, though. There were enough healthy performers the last couple months of the season, guys that we've been accustomed to seeing producing, not producing. And that's where we do bring it to what happened these last two games. Gunnar Henderson, 0 for 7, 4 strikeouts. Adley Rutschman, 1 for 8, 2 Ks. Ryan Mountcastle, 0 for 7, 4 Ks. So, okay, those last two guys, we've covered that. All right. I mean, Mountcastle came back for the last week. He missed over a month, right? I mean, that wrist, which was odd how they handled it at first because they kept him on the roster and they played shorthanded for 3 or 4 days before they finally
Dude,
put him on.
you
But
said on the air, I think he's done. He's down in Florida. He's done. Like, you're
I
like, I
mean,
don't think he's coming back. I mean, because
right. So
nobody
he
believed
tried
it.
to he tried
Yeah.
to make it back. And again, we can debate. And at some point in time, you do have to say, look, if you're so hurt to the point where you can't help the club, then it's, it wasn't Adley Rutschman anymore, assuming whatever it was. So at that point, it's like, is it real? Does this make sense? If Lamar Jackson suddenly looks like Tyler Huntley out there, and I'm picking on Tyler Huntley a little bit, but you get my point. Then something, you're asking what the heck's going on, right? When it's a long time, when it's, the if Lamar was played like that for 8 or 9 games, which is what Adley Rutschman did in half a baseball season, you'd be asking questions. But Anthony Santander, 1 for 8, 2 strikeouts. Jordan Westberg, he acknowledged his hand wasn't 100%. But, he got some hits at the end of the regular season, when he came back. 1 for 6 with the strikeout. Colton Cowser did fracture his hand when he got hit on
So he wouldn't have
Wednesday
been
night.
playing. There would
So
be
he
no
would have
game
been
for him.
done, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
he's going to be in a cast, and he quipped. He's like, man, this is going to mess up my golf game for the first 2 months of the off season. I mean, obviously, he said that in jest. He's disappointed and everything, but
But he's a real
what
character anyway. He's a
he is,
lighthearted guy,
he
right?
is, he is, and look, he needs to become more consistent. It's maddening how great he can be at times and how bad he looks at times. But look at where he was a year ago. I mean, he wasn't even on the postseason roster last year because of how bad he was when he was called up. That's why it's important to keep the proper perspective when we're talking about Jackson Holliday or Kobe Mayo or Heston Kjerstad, right? I
And
mean,
how they adjust to that failure.
so that's the
That's
thing. I mean,
baseball.
so I look at all of this, and this is where we need to, and this is where this is going to be a huge offseason for Mike Elias and the brass, because, and we can get into this in more, we can break it and have another segment about this. I mean, it's the offseason now. We're going to have plenty of time to talk about the baseball team and what they're going to do. But how do you react without overreacting? What happened here over the last couple months absolutely warrants some reaction. And I don't know exactly what that is. I tend to not be on the hasty side. I'm not going to sit here and say fire the hitting coaches, but I do think you need to take a long look at your process. And is there something we're missing beyond the injuries? The injuries are a big part of it, and the pitching side especially, right? Good news is Felix Bautista threw a bullpen the other day at Camden Yards. He's going to be full go by spring training. Now, fingers crossed that the elbow is fine, and because we know that with John Means, there's never a guarantee that everything's fine. But on the pitching side, we're going to talk about a lot of that because there were a lot of injuries, and Corbin Burns, what that's going to happen there, or who are they going to get to replace Corbin Burns? Where's Grayson Rodriguez in all this, right? I mean, all of those factors, but I think they need to look at their lineup, their offensive profile, their personnel, and say, how do we make this better? Now, some of it's going to be guys just come back healthy, but do we need to add a little more established veteran talent? And when I say that, I don't mean Austin Slater and Eloy Jimenez and Emmanuel Rivera, right? Someone established. Doesn't have to be a former MVP, but someone that can swing from the right side, someone that can get on base from the right side, right? I mean, they hit Austin Slater for Ryan O'Hearn in that game. If you're going to hit for Ryan O'Hearn against the lefty, it's got to be a better option than Austin Slater, right? I mean, that's not good enough. That's a second division bench player right there at this point in his career.
And Hearn could hit a home
So
run.
so that's where you look at this thing and say, okay, how do you react without overreacting? Because I think there is some work to be done, and you've heard me talk about this, and we'll get into this in more detail. I think the Orioles were kind of caught in between with starting to feel like you're going to be moving on from Austin Hayes, which they did. Who knows what's going to happen with Santander? Who knows what's going to happen with Mountcastle? Who knows what's going to happen with Mullins? As these guys are, in Santander's case, walk year. Other guys, last year of arbitration. That's kind of a pivotal time. But did you see enough from the young guys to just hand them the reins? Is that the appropriate response either? So they've got some work to do. That all is not lost. And again, I'm with you on the injuries and that explaining so much of this, but I don't think it's as simple as, oh, we just run it back. I think last year was much more of a run it back and add an ace, which they did. And the ace pitched exactly how you wanted him to in game one. But I don't think this teammate needs major surgery, but I do think there are some procedures to be done. I do think there's some outpatient stuff to do, to use the medical analogy. So we'll see. But boy, what a disappointing way for it to end. At the same time, Nestor, you've heard my tone. You were even joking about calling me Debbie Downer. I haven't been. By about late August, I got to the point where I didn't know if this was going to happen for this team. I picked them to win this series. I would have picked them to lose against the Yankees, but I can't sit here and say I'm 1,000% shocked that this happened, even if it's incredibly disappointing to be swept a second straight year in October.
Luke Jones is going to be down at the other ballpark, the other side of the parking lot for the next 3, maybe 4 months. We'll see how far it goes. Ravens are headed to Cincinnati this weekend. We're headed next Friday to Pizza John's. It was Luke's birthday. The Orioles got eliminated on his birthday. Wah, wah. I'll get you crab cakes, though. We're going to have pizza at Pizza John's. I'll have Raven scratch-offs to give away from the Maryland Lottery. That is Friday the 11th. Also celebrating Sammy Hagar's birthday, Jim Palmer, John Wooden, Stacy Keebler, all the good people born on October the 14th. So October 11th, next Friday, will be Pizza John's. I'm going to be setting up more crab cake tours. All those brought to you by our friends at Jiffy Lube Multi-Care. My oyster tours rocking right now. You're going to see it out at Baltimore Positive. I'm going to, I waited for baseball to either figure it out. It's over with now. Maryland Oyster Tour is brought to you by our friends at Liberty Pure Solutions. They keep my water clean, well water clean. If you're anywhere in the Baltimore area, they're located in North Baltimore County. But it's a lot of people, well water, don't know how to treat it, don't know what's up. You got that green thing going on. Don't drink that water. Call Liberty Pure Solutions, 1-800-CLEAN Water. Make sure that that's working for you, as well as our friends at Curio Wellness and Far and Dotter. Had a great conversation with Wendy Bronfine this week, supportive of Living Classrooms Foundation and Maritime Magic. That big event is Friday night this week. We've always been supportive of Living Classrooms Foundation as well. I did a big show last week with a guy who did a Capital Center retrospective, so you're going to hear some of that on the radio here this weekend. We're going to get you ready for the Cincinnati game, but we've got a lot of to get out of our systems here on the Orioles elimination. I hope you read my letter to David Rubenstein. I hope you read my letter to Eric DaCosta. I hope you read my Declaration of Independence, because I've been doing this a long time, and I hope to be doing it a long more time, as Luke and I would tell you. There's only one way that this is going to work, and that's for me to be honest. That's the only way I can continue to do this. So for those of you out there reading the David Rubenstein letter, I appreciate it. Send me some feedback. I'm a very available individual. Ness at BaltimorePositive.com. He's Luke. I'm Nestor. Stay with us. We got plenty more on the Orioles and what lies ahead.